new. I didn't get to be here for Advent 1, so Happy New Year. That's the new year in the Christian calendar, and for the Christian walk is on Advent. That's where we start the whole new lectionary. So, all right, here we go, a little quiz. So we're going from year A to year B, right? So this is the second week of year B. So for year A, who is the gospeler, the gospel voice that we were following all throughout year A? I just heard over here. Matthew. Kelly Gardner for 500 points. Matthew. So now we're going to year B. So who's going to be in our voice? Mark. That's right. So we got Mark. So Mark's going to really be our voice in the wilderness. That's going to be it's his drama, right? He's going to be leading us this whole year, and then we sprinkle John in. So year C is next year, obviously, the next time. And who's year C? That's the year of Luke. Okay, cool. So now we're in Advent, and it's this time where we're in the darkness, and we're balancing this time of looking at the darkness in our lives. There's this crazy or strange duality that there's light that's coming, but it's not here yet. So we are being called in Advent to sit in the darkness. And one way that we do that, as Father Todd preached last week, real effectively, was the power of silence. I don't know about you, but this last week, there was times when I was just sitting there, and it was really quiet, and that sermon just evoked in me just be still and listen to the noise of God in that silence. It was powerful, real powerful stuff. So we have these tools that we use during Advent to really be aware of God in the darkness of our lives, in the darkness of our souls. And Advent is calling us, don't be afraid of the darkness. You have to go to the darkness. Right? You have to go to the cross before you can get to Easter. Before we get to Christmas, we got to walk through the wilderness. Our passage today that the Mayfield gals read, who read Isaiah? Was that you, Lila? Lila read that you have this Isaiah passage. So Isaiah, it's got two main areas, right? The first one is chapter 1 through 39, and that's all about God saying, hey, you're messing up. You're not following my ways. We made a covenant, we made a pact, we were cool, but you keep on ignoring the orphan, you're not taking care of the widow, you're not visiting those in prison, you're not taking care of the foreigner or the alien, you're entering into a world of chaos. And they do. So he keeps on saying that over and over again for 39 chapters, judgment is coming, judgment is coming, judgment is coming. Sure enough, judgment comes. And what happens? God allows the Babylonians with King Nebuchadnezzar to come on over and take all of the great minds and the men and the young folks and pull them all the way out to Babylon. And the people still here start to rebel, and they come again. They take even more, pull them all the way and bring them out to Babylon. Take them away from their home. Then they start rebelling again. They think God is with us. But they left God. They abandoned God. So then it gets really bad. Then the Babylonians come in and they just burn down the temple. And they burn down Jerusalem. The place they hold so sacred, the temple is where you find God, the Holy of Holies, gone. So now they're over here. We don't get that in Isaiah. All we get now is just today, which starting with chapter 40, which Lila read, which is hey, comfort, Jerusalem. Comfort. The Holy Shepherd is here. And they're about to go back in the wilderness. And they're going to go back to Jerusalem. But they spent all this time in the darkness. And he's saying, have hope. God has always been here. God is always with you. God was doing something in the darkness. God is going to lead you through the wilderness. And there's going to be great light for you to have a revival back in Jerusalem. But you can't get to this new light and this new revival unless you experienced all this darkness. This is going to form you. It's going to tear you down. It's going to build new things I need to build inside you, and I'm going to bring you over here. They don't have the temple anymore. So what does that do? Is that horrible? Yeah, many people, this is horrible. You read the Psalms, oh my gosh, they're just miserable. But they weren't looking in the darkness the right way. That misery of being in the darkness allowed the Israelites, our Judeo-Christian roots, to say, we don't need a temple just to find God. They start to find God in their homes. This is where the synagogue comes in. They can start to share the word with each other. Just want to see if you're awake, Tammy. Someone have this removed. Okay. Justin, can we get on that? Okay. But so now it's some fruit came out of this. really good fruit. Without that, we were dependent upon a building, a temple. That's where God stayed in this tiny little thing right over here. And this is the Holy of Holies. Now that's gone. So now we get to experience here. Come on, Tammy, come on over. We're going to break bread. It's Shabbat. And we're going to sit here and we're going to talk about God and pray to God as a family. Oh, wow. And the Gardeners over here too. Maybe we could come together. We're going to have some, like what we would call home church, right? This is just people, good old Jews getting together and say, no, let's talk about our God and love on our God. So we get these two, we experience it together as a family and friends, and we're going to read the Word together. We're not just going to be dependent on some priest to do it. We're going to do it. Well, that's glorious. That only happened because they were in the darkness, and they had to do it. This last week, not last week, but a couple weeks ago, so Anastasia and I took our first big family trip, and we went off to North Carolina. And so we went up into the mountains, and we went to Beach Mountain, if you guys are familiar with this. So we get, and newsflash, I don't know if you know this, but when you're taking a road trip with a 6-month-old, it's very different than when you just roll with you and your spouse or your partner or your friend. Whole different experience. Well, I didn't get that memo. So I'm looking at like, it's gonna take us like 13 hours or something like that to get there. And I was like, just truck through, we're gonna be fine. You know, we even rented an SUV so my, tall frame can finally fit inside of a car. We're gonna be good, I'll be so comfortable. Well, Anastasia gets car sick, so me driving, that stopped. She had to drive. And then, these 6 months old, they like to get real busy inside these SUVs, right? And when you're driving. So, and we breastfeed. Well, I don't breastfeed. Anastasia breastfeeds the child. So we're like, you can't do that while we're driving, right? That's illegal, apparently. So we have to stop every hour and a half. So we don't even make it past Savannah, right? So now we're staying in Savannah, and then we had to get back on the road. And so, long story short, it takes us 36 hours to get there, right? So we finally get there, but then we get to the mountain, the Beach Mountain. And because this journey was just, jacked from the beginning, our plan was to get to the mountain because our friend from Education Equals Hope, who hooked us up with this cabin, said that you really get to the mountain during daylight. You don't, as a rookie, want to do that mountain at night. Well, of course, that didn't happen, right? So by the time we get to the mountain, it's like 10 p.m. And so we start the mountain, and it's totally pitch black. And we're on speakerphone with Anastasia's brother. And I told him, I said, yeah, we're going up there. We got a cabin up at the top of the mountain. That's the first time that Anastasia heard the word cabin. So in Anastasia's head, she goes into all of her horror movies that she watches on Netflix. She loves horror movies. And so she's there's some B horror movies called The Cabin. I don't know if you guys have ever seen The Cabin and stuff. It's really, it's scary stuff, but it's Appalachian country, some demented little cabin, and then Pennywise from It, Stephen King's It, the clown is there waiting hi, So that's the vision she has with 3 banjos playing in the background. And she thinks we're toast, we're not gonna get through it. So I'm starting to pick up on this vibe from her. She's keeps on asking these questions about cabin. What do you mean cabin? And who is this guy? I'm this guy from Education Equals Hope. He's partner in ministry. She's have you ever met him? I'm in Ecuador, She's but here in the States? I'm no, he's really nice. She's and we're staying at his place? Uh-huh. Is he gonna be there? No. Can he be there? Yeah, he's an hour and a half away. So she starts tripping out. So she's tripping out. Baby boy, of course, starts waking up. It's pitch black on the road. And then in North Carolina, they have these deer. And these deer, they're like squirrels in the suburbs of Chicago. They're just everyone's best friend. They're not afraid of you. They're just hey, what's up? Yeah, it's a dark road, right? And it's near mating season, and so there's stuff going on. And so they're active. So that's the scene of just driving up this dark road, and the navigation is about to go out, and baby boy's crying, Anastasia's freaking out, deers are about to jump in front of the car, and I'm driving 5 miles per hour with the locals behind me being what is your story, right? With my rental Arizona license plates, right? You're in the darkness, right? And these switchbacks are just going back and forth and driving, and we finally get to the top, and we finally get to the cabin. It's not a cabin. It's this luxurious place that's just beautiful, right? But we just go in there, we just crash out. And then we wake up in the morning, and it's just gorgeous, right? That moment when you wake up in the new place, and the light has shined, and you get out on the porch, and it's just, the mountain, the landscape, and you're just holy cow, right? The light has shined upon you. And then work just begins, not work, ministry, just other responsibilities begin to like just fade away, and just be present in the glory of God. And Anastasia's like, oh, this is not what I had in mind at all. This is not a cabin. So she's good, baby boy's happy, and and then you start to get more confident in mountain culture. And now instead of doing 5 miles per hour, no, I'm doing 45 miles per hour on the roads. I'm like a local now, right? But it was this journey of darkness where I allowed the darkness to become sort of this dark mountain that became scary. And it kind of, in that little moment, ruled my journey. I didn't see the light. I was just focused on the darkness in front of me, of the deer, of scary cabin culture, of my son. And Jesus was definitely not driving the car, right? My fears were. My fears were. And that happened. Well, take your pick from 2020 of what your dark mountain is. I'm sure we could just go down the list of what has really been weighing on your soul, all of our souls collectively, from the pandemic to you call it. 2020 just gives you a nice offering, a buffet of dark mountains to climb. So you take that, but see, what God is saying in Isaiah is like, don't throw away the darkness. Like, don't throw away a good crisis. God is constantly working in us and working in our world and teaching us something. And I'm not minimizing the struggle it has been the last 10 months, financially, physically, emotionally, just you name it, on all of us, the whole world, but just here in the States. What is God saying? What is God teaching us in this darkness, in the pain, in the struggle to us? That's the first thing, right? And the second, do we trust that he's a sovereign God who's watching over this? Do I trust, like in Isaiah it says, make his path straight, which we then hear in the gospel about Mark saying you got to make his path straight. Because if you don't make the path straight, if you are not willing to trust this windy road that there's no business, there should be any roads on Beach Mountain, but ingenuity has come through and there's these beautiful, wonderful roads. If you don't trust that God has this pathway for you, it's going to be a mess. But can you trust that God has paved these straight paths? Can you trust these you need to clear out all the fear and all the junk in order for God to really teach you something in this darkness? But if you're lingering and focusing on these false prophets, if you're lingering and focusing on the anxiety or the depression or the bitterness or the loss or take your pick, or even our own ego, right? Our worship of material things, we're reminded of that during Advent. If we focus on that, we're not clearing a path for God to come in and show us and teach us and heal us and lift us up. These distractions just come at us. It's your dark mountain. It's the baby crying. It's the fear of the clown inside the cabin, right? That's all false. Isaiah says, listen, you are like grass. Come up, you fall down, go back in the earth. But not me, I'm God. I'm sovereign. And when I hear that passage, I don't think of myself as just being a limp piece of grass that's just going to die. From dust I come and dust I go too. The beauty of that idea is that our problems, the problem that you're struggling with right now, is like this to God. He is so big. That's what he's telling the people of Israel. This horrible loss of experience, don't worry, I got this. And I'm going to work with you on this. And I'm going to make so much beautiful lemonade out of these lemons I've given you. Why? Because, listen, you come and you go, but me, I'm here forever. And there's light waiting for you back in Jerusalem. You just got to trust me, and you got to clear a pathway in your heart for me to land. God is like this EMT helicopter that's just coming down into the battlefield of your heart. But if you don't clear a path in your heart for him to come down, he's got nowhere to go. And he's not a dictator. He's not going to say, yeah, Brian, you're going to love me whether you like it or not. And you're going to pray to me. And you're going to worship me. No. He's like, Brian, I love you. You want to dance? All right, let's do it. So you have to be intentional during the darkness of Advent. In your prayer life, clearing out, making straight the path, clearing out the path. Acknowledging, God, I have some fears I'm wrestling with. I have some bitterness. I have my own ego I wrestle with, my own narcissism. Let me clear a path so you can come in and change it. You're not supposed to preach from anything you're kind of currently wrestling with. So I'm not going to go into great detail, but when I get there, I'll tell you the end. but I just want to touch upon this just to maybe hopefully this helps. So I've just been wrestling with something over the last week that's been worrying me, and I've just been struggling with it. And I realized I was trying to solve it. And it's just so full of worry. And I was going to friends and whatever, trying to get good advice, but I was really freaking out. And I'm reading this passage, you're preparing for the sermon, and the beauty of when you preach, like you gotta work it. You can't preach it unless I'm doing it myself, right? And I'm like, what are you doing, Christian? Are you allowing God to come in and do what God does in these situations? When you're in the darkness, this is when God said, yes, this is when you call me. You call me all the time, but have me come in and rush in. And once I surrendered, I said, all right, you love me. I'm your child. And my problems just come and go. From dust they come, dust they go. You got this, God. Let me stand back. Let me get back and let me ride shotgun and let you get in the driver's seat. I know what you want. And I know what you have destined. And I know you love goodness and love and compassion and healing, so I'm just going to trust. And boy, did my temperature just go shoo. And I have a whole new perspective on looking at this problem and be like, oh, we got this. We're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. It's your dark mountain. Acknowledge this dark mountain that you're on right now. The darkness is scary. It can be very frightening. But it can be so fruitful because our God doesn't disappear. God never walked away from the Jews when they were in Babylon. He was there feeding them and growing them, and they might not have realized it yet. But the way that we do our faith now, here in this church, here as Christians, is directly as a result from that Babylonian captivity. God is always doing something. So not to minimize the horrors and the struggles of the pandemic and everything we've experienced this year, but God, boy, teach me, God, form me. Use this. Don't let a pandemic, don't let this crisis go to waste. God is always working in the darkness, and that is Advent. Name the mountain. Clear a pathway in your life. Maybe you have to fill a valley, as Isaiah says. It says, fill the valleys, bring the mountains down. Maybe there's an emptiness, and maybe that emptiness needs to be filled with just more service over the next 2 weeks. God was upset with the Babylonians, with the Israelites, because they weren't taking care of the poor, they weren't taking care of the widows, they weren't taking care of the orphans, they just kind of into themselves. So maybe for 2 weeks you're going to commit. We're working with a foster care organization now. Maybe there's somebody you can partner with that and work with Tammy. Tammy knows all about that, right? So maybe there's ways that you can do that. I don't know. That's where you work out with God. But make sure that prayer life is sharp. Clear the path so that EMT helicopter can just come and say, I'm going to land right here in your heart. That's the beauty of Advent. And that light of Christmas is there. A rebirth. A refreshment, an intimacy with our loving God. Walk towards Him, shine the light bright, and embrace the darkness.